Yes, very good morning to one and all. The best teacher teaches from the art, not from the book. I am welcoming you all for this third day of virtual faculty development program organized by Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam. I am Dr. V. Shyam Sundar, Assistant Professor and co-convener of this event, is going to moderate the two sessions on this day. Firstly, I welcome our beloved Principal Ma'am, Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh, to give welcome note on this third day morning. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Shyam. A pleasant morning to one and all present here for the first session of the third day of the FDP program. On behalf of the Directorate of Legal Studies and our college, Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam, I deem it a great privilege to welcome our resource person for today, respected Professor Dr. M.S. Soundarpandian Sir, Principal, Andaman Law College, Port Blair. My acquaintance with Sir dates back to 1997, when I first entered the teaching profession at Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Chennai. Definitely, he is a man of such few words, actually. He's such a calm and kind-hearted person with an extraordinary caliber and passion for teaching. As a senior professor, he used to guide and maneuver us through the nuances of teaching when we were raw juniors in this profession. These innate qualities of Sir made him adorn the coveted posts like the Director of School of Excellence, Registrar of National Law School, Trichy, and Registrar of Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University. And now, even after his superannuation, he's occupying the post of Principal of Andaman Law College only because of his vast knowledge and rich experience, which was much sought after by the government of Puducherry. I extend my heartfelt thanks to you, Sir, for accepting our invite and gracing the occasion with your invaluable lecture. Sir's topic for today will be labor law reforms in India with special reference to Industrial Relations Code. Dear participants, I'm sure you're all going to witness a wonderful, enriching session. With this short note, I thank you once again, sir, and I hand over the floor to Shyam.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am. It is my great honor and proud to introduce today's speaker and my teacher in first year law college, Professor Dr. M.S. Soundarpandian sir. Now, already ma'am told, he is a principal of Andaman Law College, Port Blair. Sir has completed his BL degree and Master of Law in Labor Law and Administrative Law from the Madras University. Sir has done MA Sociology in Annamalai University and got his PhD in Labor Law in Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University. After his completion of his legal education, Sir practiced for 5 years as advocate. Sir began his academic career in 1988 as a lecturer and appointed permanently by the Tamil Nadu Public Service Commission in 1989 in the Government Law College. Sir promoted as Associate Professor in 1998 and appointed as Professor of Law and Director of UG and PG Studies in Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University in 2010. Sir was appointed as a HOD, Labor and Administrative Law Department. Sir is the first registrar of Tamil Nadu National Law University, Tirusirappalli, and Sir has having 32 years of vast teaching experience. Besides, Sir as NSS Program Officer for more than 10 years. Sir has held new number of key positions in the syndicate member, Senate member in Tamil Nadu Law University. Along with Sir is a member of inspection team of Pondicherry University, granting affiliation to its affiliated colleges. Apart from that, Sir served as a member coordinator, chairman nominated by NAC, and inspected 27 law universities, law schools, and law colleges in India so far. Sir already guided 2 PhD research scholars, and 7 of them are waiting in the line. Sir published 1 book and 19 research articles in reputed journal. Sir is a friendly and approachable teacher. When I studied in BL, Sir in 1996 in Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Madras, Sir took us on law and sociology. We are all very fond to attend his class because of his clean attire, that is dressing code. So sir will come in perfect manner. In those times when we are studying, there is no uniform for the BL students. But sir will ask us not to come in the t-shirt. So he only taught us how to wear a dress, how to wear a formal dress, because we are studying a professional course. In that way, I am very much delighted to hear his voice today, and I am very much delighted to introduce my teacher today. Sir, please, sir. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shyam.
Thank you.
Respected and my beloved sister, Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh, now the principal of Chennai, Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam. My beloved friend, who is now the Director of Legal Studies, Professor Dr. Chokalingam, respected and beloved co-conveners of this program, Dr. V. Shyam Sundar, Mrs. Epsiba, and also Mrs. Devi. Respected professors, resource persons, learned faculty members, and also the respected participants of the faculty development program. A very pleasant good afternoon to one and all present here. I feel I am honored to attend an historic academic event, a wonderful event jointly organized by the Directorate of Legal Education in Tamil Nadu and also Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam. I really feel honored that I am given an opportunity to address, to share my views with the learned law teachers in this faculty development program. I said it is a wonderful academic event for the reason that organizing such a mega event was not thought of in those days. I may say that it is of recent origin, especially a law college organizing such a mega event is really deserving appreciation. Though it may not be proper at the beginning itself to compliment and also appreciate the sincere, untiring effort taken by the principal, Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh. I wholeheartedly appreciate, Madam, for your sincere effort. You will be more blessed by all the participants because you provided this wonderful opportunity for them. In the history of, especially the legal education in Tamil Nadu, an event may be organized by a university or some other department, but an institution, a very distinguished institution has come forward in the state of Tamil Nadu for the first time to organize such a wonderful academic event. It reflects that to what extent Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College, Pudupakkam, is more interested in developing the abilities, the teaching aptitude of the young new law teachers who joined the Tamil Nadu Legal Educational Service at different government law colleges in the state. I am doubly happy that it is my alma mater. Though I was not fortunate to study law in Chennai Law College, I was more blessed to work under dynamic leaders of those days as a faculty nearly for 10 years in Chennai Law College alone. Though at the stage of, at my later career, I joined permanently Tamil Nadu Dr. Ambedkar Law University. I served Tamil Nadu Legal Education Service for 20 years and 10 years in Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College. Therefore, I feel that I am indebted to participate, attend any program organized by Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College because I still feel that I am a member of that organization. The topic today assigned to me is labor law reforms. With special reference to Industrial Relations Code 2020. The participants know the very object of this faculty development program. Taking it for granted that I need not say the importance of this type of programs. However, I would like to make a mention that this type of program will definitely rejuvenate, energize, update your legal knowledge in some of the important branches of law. As a young teacher, you tend to teach. Therefore, though we have many number of branches of law, all branches of law may not be taken for discussion in this faculty development program within a few days. Therefore, I presume that Madam has selected some of the important branches of law, maybe criminal jurisprudence, constitutional jurisprudence, administrative jurisprudence, or labor jurisprudence for that matter. Before commencing, I would like to say that though I am expected to focus on labor law reforms in India, I do not want to touch upon the provisions of the labor legislations for the simple reason that the participants are the learned teachers, law teachers, explaining them the provisions of law. Unless and otherwise it is warranted, let me refrain from that exercise. Let me concentrate on the areas where controversy prevails, why labor law reforms could not be successfully brought about by the legislature, how to overcome those difficulties, what is the finality to bring about a real labor law reforms. That is my aim in this interactive session. I would like to quote the observation made by Aristotle. He said, at his best, man is the noblest of all animals. Separated from law and justice, he is the worst. We know what he means. When law and justice is not found, man will behave very worstly. Law and justice are the integral part of human life. If we ask a question to ourselves as to what law is, the question may appear to be so simple, but it is very, very difficult to answer. As a law teacher, as a person who learned law, simple question cannot be easily articulated. There can be no single word to define the term law. What is the nature of law? What is the essence of law? Or some of the long disputed questions. Despite development of various legal theories attempting to define the concept of law, no answer can be considered to be complete in all respect. Our effort to find out a very complete, meaningful definition for the law continues. We do not know when we will succeed. Though explanations are offered, many schools propounded the definition for the concept of law, but we till today do not have any complete, satisfactory definition. I am not telling about the explanation for the term law. We all know that law has no independent existence because law cannot act in vacuum. Law is an indispensable and integral part of the social system. In the larger social system, legal system forms a part. Both legal system and also social system mutually influence each other. Whenever there is any change in the social system, law will adapt itself, taking into consideration the social, economic, and political changes that are taking place in the social system. The legal system will adapt itself to achieve the desired result. Therefore, in any given society, law is considered to be dynamic. It can never be static. It has to change. It has to equip itself with a changing environment. But unfortunately, though we expect laws are dynamic in nature, I said it is unfortunate to notice that such a quality of law, namely the dynamic nature of law, has not been found in labor legislations. Most of the labor legislations are totally outdated, obsolete, unsuited to the new economic environment. Labor jurisprudence or the industrial jurisprudence is considered to be the most neglected branch of law. The legislations made that are prevailing today were enacted either before independence or immediately within few years of its independence. You can just recall from your memory It may be Trade Union Act 1926. 26. It is nearing a century. Very old. Without any change. That is the beauty. Industrial Disputes Act 1947. Just a month before country's independence, the act was enacted. It was also pre-independent act. Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946, pre-independence. You take for that matter any type of labor legislation, either enacted before independence or at the time of independence, almost substantial number of labor legislations. And these legislations even continue today without any major change. Therefore, we are unable to accept what happened to labor legislations, how labor legislations continue without any change, despite the fact that the entire economic scenario in the country is changed. All legislations I can say, it is proved, appear to be outdated, obsolete, and unable to cope with the changing environment. Therefore, in this context, as a teacher of law, we have to explore, we have to probe into why labor legislation is considered to be the one and the only legislation, one and the only part of the jurisprudence which remains static. Compare labor legislations with any other branches of law. All are updated. Why labor legislations alone do not undergo any changes for nearly 7 decades? When we look at the nature of labor legislations, we have to admit the fact that labor law is no more considered as a private law. Today it is emerging as a public law. After all, labor laws gives rights and duties to the respective parties, maybe working class and the employer, or employees and employer. The rights and duties are created only by an agreement or contract. That is why we say the contract of employment is a base, is a foundation on which the industry functions. Therefore, truly speaking, labor legislations belong to the realm of private law, and it is not at all public law, because the respective parties decide, determine their mutual rights and duties. State has no role, but today the rights and duties of the respective parties are defined by the state under the provisions of law. Whether the employees enforce their right or not, the rights are conferred, the rights are recognized in favor of the employees through various labor legislations. When the rights and liberties are determined not by the parties, by the legislations enacted by the state, it emerges as a public law. The state, as a custodian of the interest of the working class, has a bounden duty to enact legislations adequately in order to protect the rights of the employees. Therefore, the character attached with labor legislations, namely private law, no more holds good. It has now become in the domain of public law, protected by the state. When we look at the innumerable labor legislations which are present today, really one will wonder the complexity of labor laws make us very, very difficult to identify which provision is applicable in a given situation. When we classify the labor legislations, Just let me touch upon. We may broadly classify it into three categories: industrial relations legislation, social security legislation, and labor economic legislation. I do not want to enumerate what legislations will come under each category. Altogether, we may identify that n number of legislation, 44 legislations are made by the parliament. 44 legislations are the central legislations. More than 150 legislations are made by the state government. A voluminous branch of law. When we examine at the micro level in respect of these central legislations and also some of the state legislations, we find that some of the legislations were enacted and enforced by the center. Some other legislations were enacted by the center but enforced by the state, and others are enacted and enforced by the state government. Therefore, identifying the appropriate provision of labor legislation is also a very, very difficult task. Once again, the very glaring feature of labor legislation is we talk about 200 legislations. To whom these 200 legislations will apply? Who are the beneficiaries? The entire gamut of labor legislations will apply to 7% of the working class. 100% working class. Among the working class, only 7% constitute the organized labor, the formal sector. You know what is organized labor? Where they are organized by the institution of trade union, assert their rights as against the employer or the establishment, industrial establishment. They become organized sector or formal sector in terms of economy. So the entire legislations apply only to the 7% of the working class. The remaining 93% remain unorganized. If we notice this fact, why to have these type of legislations just for 7% of the working class? How to bring the remaining 93% of labor force within the fold of labor legislations? It becomes an Herculean task. And this 7%, previously it was 10%, and it is now gradually declining. Now the statistical data which is going to be published by the central government will exhibit that even that 7% is now reduced to 6%. Everyone knows the impact LPG created in the nation's economy: liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Trade union activities are totally declining. The organized sector now become unorganized. Therefore, the strength and the percentage of the organized sector is likely to be reduced from 7% to 6%. So all these 200 legislations focus only on the 6% working population. When we look at the efforts so far taken to reform labor legislations, we find the efforts are laudable, appreciated. No other branch of law would have witnessed this tremendous effort taken, but no effect. From the year 1930s, I would like to very briefly state the efforts taken by the government in reform to bring about reformation in labor legislations. Firstly, the Royal Commission on Labour, constituted by British India in the year 1931. Several legislators, really a sincere effort taken by the Britishers to make legislations. See, you may see many legislations I pointed out were enacted under the patronage of the British rulers and not in free India. All major legislations for that matter. The same legislation still govern the entire industrialization system. All the three legislations, namely the Trade Union Act 1926, Industrial Disputes Act 1947, and also Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946, enacted by the Britishers. Royal Commission played a very crucial role in bringing about labor legislations at that point of time. Subsequently, after country's independence, with the coming into force of the Constitution of India, as we know, socialistic principle formed. The cardinal principle, especially under Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, namely the directive principles of state policy, to promote all those principles, reformative measures were taken. As the then rulers felt that the existing labor legislations could not suit with the changing scenario, they wanted to bring about reformations. Therefore, they constituted one National Commission on Labour in the year 1969. Justice Gajendra Gadkar was appointed as a chairman of the commission, first National Commission on Labour. The entire labor legislation was thoroughly examined. An excellent report submitted by the said commission, and the government also accepted, and however, it took nearly 8 to 9 years to make a new legislation, especially in industrial relations field. Industrial Relations Bill 1978 was introduced in the Lok Sabha. The then government was Janata government headed by Morarji Desai. Had that bill been passed, the entire labor law would be different in India. But we are unfortunate that soon after introduction of the bill in the Lok Sabha got dissolved. Because the law, when we look at, as I am focusing only on industrial relations law, I would like to say that when we look at the policy and the provisions of law, we do not find any consistency. The policy did not get harmonized with the law. When we look at the statement of objects and reasons of that legislation, maybe Trade Union Act or the Industrial Disputes Act, it is clearly exhibited that industrial peace will be most enduring if it is based on mutual settlement of industrial disputes. To put it alternatively, it means mutual voluntary settlement of dispute deserves more consideration. Compulsory adjudication has to be invoked only as a last resort, when the hopes of attaining mutual settlement of industrial disputes become impossible. Therefore, they wanted to give full freedom to the parties to settle their disputes by themselves. What it means is the state has to play a very limited role, facilitating the parties to settle amicably their disputes by themselves. But on the other hand, what happened in the provisions of law is the government, maybe in the name of appropriate government, assumed enormous power, canvassing for compulsory adjudication. I will point out some of the defective part of that provisions of law, which went totally inconsistent with the declared policy at later point of time. What I wanted to convey is, realizing the policy, the Industrial Relations Bill 1978 was beautifully drafted. And as a law teacher, we also know, any law teacher, any student of law who studied labor law, they will be knowing what is the implication of Bangalore Water Supplies case. Bangalore Water Supplies and Sewerage Board versus A. Rajappa, a 1978 Supreme Court, where triple test was laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court to say, identify whether an organization is an industry or not. When substantial changes were made by the Supreme Court through judicial decisions, those recommendations made by the judiciary were also duly incorporated in the said IR Bill 1978. Even today, the same triple test formulated by the Supreme Court in Rajappa's case remain the rule of law to identify whether an institution is an industry or not. Section 2J has no relevance, which may define the industry as any business, trade, etc., etc. It has become totally redundant, thrown out from the statute book. Even last month, 1 year before, Thakur Justice, while delivering a judgment on an interesting case relating to whether an institution is an industry or not, he wanted to review the adequacy of the triple test formulated by the Supreme Court in Rajappa's case. According to him, the test formulated does not hold good today, because several defective parts we can identify even in the triple test of the Supreme Court today. Therefore, on the basis of the recommendation made by the first National Commission on Labour, a beautiful legislation was introduced, but unfortunately that did not happen, namely Industrial Relations Bill 1978. After that, after 3-4 years, another committee, a national committee, was constituted by the central government, namely Sanat Mehta Committee. Sanat Mehta Committee, to recommend piecemeal changes in labor legislations. On the basis of those recommendations only, Section 2J and some other provisions of the Industrial Disputes Act, Trade Union Act, and some other legislations were made. But unfortunately, see, I would like to just quote, the triple test was formulated by the Supreme Court. The legislature differently defined the concept of industry under Section 2J of the Industrial Disputes Act. As Supreme Court declared this is a test, Section 2J has become irrelevant. Now, Sanat Mehta Committee recommended that the test laid down by the Supreme Court should be incorporated in the statute book. Accordingly, it was also incorporated. Amendment was made in the year 1982. But as you know, it has become a very fashion for the legislature to delegate power of commencement to the executive government. Though legislations are made, it is for the executive authority to decide as to when the new law will come into force. That did not come into force. That amended provisions could not see the light of the day till date. Even for your kind information, the Trade Union Act 1926 was amended in the year 1946. 1946, incorporating trade union recognition. It also met with the same fate. That could not come into force because the executive government did not choose to notify. After Sanat Mehta, Ramanujam Committee was constituted in the year 1990. Ramanujam, an eminent trade unionist, he was the president of Indian National Trade Union Congress, an eminent leader. The committee also thoroughly studied and recommended. Those recommendations were also ignored by the government. Then came National Commission on Rural Labor, 1994. The recommendations of that commission also met the same fate. Quite interestingly, when new economic policy was introduced by the government in the year 1991, which brought about substantial changes in the economic scenario. Everyone knows, with the advent of liberalization, privatization, and globalization, labor legislations ought to be changed. When we say it is globalization and liberalization, the control exercised by the government should be at the minimum level. The present legislations favored, facilitated the government to exercise more control. Therefore, in order to liberalize the control mechanism exercised by the government in labor legislations, Second National Commission on Labor, under the chairmanship of Ravindra Verma, was constituted in the year 1999. The committee studied thoroughly the impact of globalization and liberalization on the Indian economy, and also focused on labor flexibility and brought about a series of changes. On the basis of those recommendations of the Second National Commission on Labor 2002, a sincere attempt has been made by the present central government to enact new legislations in the name of Labor Code. They are Industrial Relations Code 2020, Social Security Code 2020, Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020, and Wages Code 2019. Wages Code 2019, last year it was passed. These three legislations passed after 1 year. Now, these legislations have been passed. New legislations. Everyone expected that if these new labor codes are implemented in our country, the entire labor legislations will get revamped. But when we look at how the new legislations are made, if all the provisions of all the four codes are thoroughly examined, we will wonder how these code can be said to be new legislations altogether. It has totally become a old wine in new bottle. No change. They have simply consolidated. They brought all the legislations under one umbrella. That's all. You please refer the new code with the existing provisions. Rarely we find some changes, little changes then and there. We do not know why this type of legislations have been made. Though substantially, the Second National Commission on Labor recommended vast changes in the existing labor laws. Not only these efforts, and for your kind information, though labor code was made in the year 2019, and other three labor codes were passed by both houses of parliament in the year 2020. These legislations are yet to be implemented. We do not know whether the central government is having that political will to implement these new legislations. I have my own doubt, because as we aspire, why labor law? See, being as a student of labor law, I sincerely feel, I regret to say, our branch of law is not at all developing. We are unlucky. When several changes are made in legislations, it will enthuse us how to further develop all redundant, old, 1 century old legislations we are applying. How long it will continue? Last year, they planned to implement. Out of fear, the central government is hesitating because neither employer nor trade unions are happy with these legislations. That is a fact. Both are opposing. The claim, the demand made by the employer or employers federation or chamber of commerce have not been duly considered by the government. And at the same time, the rights of the working class, the trade union have not been ensured, safeguarded. Therefore, the stakeholders are not at all happy. For the last 20 times, nationwide strike was undertaken by the central trade unions. The beauty is, though this effort is taken by the present government ruled by BJP, even their own trade union wing is opposing. They are not favoring. So this is the one and the only issue where all the central trade unions, ignoring their political ideology, come to the common platform opposing the implementation of the new legislations because they sincerely feel that these legislations are not at all good, will never safeguard their rights and interest. That is why stiff agitation by both the parties. Unconfined with all these efforts, every year, maybe as a ritual, Indian Labour Conference is convened. Standing Labour Committee is convened. They review. All India Labour Ministers Conference also convened. They discuss everything. But nothing materialized so far. That is why I would like to make a comment that in no other branch of law, this much effort would have been taken to bring about reformation. This is the one and the only branch of law where substantial efforts were taken by the government, the successive governments, to make good changes in labor legislations. But in spite of their efforts, nothing materialized so far. When we look at why labor legislations could not be reformed, why reforms could not be undertaken, we identify some of the reasons. Primarily, lack of consensus, conflicting interests between the industry and the labor. What are the demands of the employer? Employer plays several demands because they have to run the industrial enterprise. Running industrial enterprise requires flexibility, liberalization, and freedom. When inflexible provisions relating to layoff, retrenchment, and closure are found in the statute book, they find that it is not at all convenient for them to run the industry. They want liberal approach in the sense that, see, as a teacher, you know, whenever any layoff is to be declared or retrenchment is to be effected or any industrial establishment is to be closed, prior permission from the appropriate government is necessary. When permission is sought, fairness will have to be, the genuineness will have to be ascertained by the appropriate government. The government may not grant permission. Therefore, withholding permission by the government will become an impediment to decide the fate or the future of the economic enterprise. Therefore, they do not want the provision requiring the employer to obtain permission from the appropriate government. That need to be relaxed, or at least from the limit 100 workers, it may be enhanced up to 1,000. If the number of workers employed in any industry exceeds 1,000 or more, permission may be imposed, may be required to be obtained. But if it is less than 1,000, no permission need to be obtained from the appropriate government for layoff, retrenchment, and closure. And this provision is not in favor of an employer. Therefore, they are demanding liberalization. Not only that, as I already pointed out, the inconsistency between the policy and law. Policy and law has not been harmonized. More importantly, excessive juridification of industrial disputes. As a student of law, as a teacher of labor law, you may be knowing how the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 gives importance to adjudication machinery for the settlement of industrial disputes. When the dispute arises between employer and employees by mutual settlement, maybe by bipartite negotiation, that is collective bargaining, they are at liberty to settle their dispute. If they could not settle their dispute, they can resort to conciliation. If conciliation also fails, they may go for arbitration. ADR method is well recognized, but not interestingly. When the parties do not invoke arbitration as a machinery for settlement of their dispute, the final resort is adjudication. You know what type of adjudication has been statutorily recognized in the Industrial Disputes Act? It is not voluntary adjudication. It is compulsory adjudication. Section 10 of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 is considered to be a focal point around which the entire scheme of the ID Act revolves. This provision confers discretionary power upon the appropriate government to refer an industrial dispute or not to refer an industrial dispute. When we say it is discretionary power, in most of the times it is not unguided by any norms. No guidelines, no norms, no yardstick, no conditions wherein we can compel the appropriate government to refer an industrial dispute for adjudication either by a labor court or industrial tribunal or the national tribunal, as the case may be. One may wonder, the very basic fundamental principle of law, which is enshrined in a celebrated maxim, namely ubi juris ibi remedium, which means whenever there is a legal right, there will be a legal remedy. Anyone who goes to the court should establish that he has a locus standi by proving that his legal right is taken away, infringed, violated. But very strangely, in the entire industrial jurisprudence, especially in the Industrial Disputes Act 1947, the parties to the industrial disputes, namely either the employer or the trade union, or a group of workers, or an employee, a workman, is legally incapacitated to approach directly a labor court or industrial tribunal for seeking appropriate relief. The very basic right to approach a court of law, right to access, is now recognized as the basic human right. even the basic human right has not been recognized in Industrial Disputes Act 1947. Exceptionally, when any industrial dispute happens to be a deemed industrial dispute, which is brought under the purview of Section 2A. 2A deals with deemed industrial dispute. Under some special circumstances, whenever any employee has been, workman has been terminated, retrenched, discharged, such termination, retrenchment, discharge may become the subject matter of the industrial dispute, and the aggrieved individual can directly approach the court, the labor court or tribunal. Other than that occasion, nowhere an aggrieved party may be the employer or any employee, workman, can directly approach the court. Thereby, the very basic and fundamental right to access remedy is denied. This is said to be excessive juridification of industrial dispute. Even when several cases were decided by the Honorable Supreme Court, the Supreme Court categorically stated that nothing can compel the appropriate government to pass an order referring an industrial dispute for adjudication. Therefore, it is for the wisdom of the appropriate government to decide. How to decide? It has to form an opinion. How opinion is formed? It is on the subjective satisfaction of the authorities. Opinion may be formed on the basis of the facts and circumstances brought to its notice. We cannot question the sufficiency or the adequacy of those materials on which an opinion has been formed by the appropriate government. As a result, if at all the trade union would like to contest before the adjudicatory authorities, they could not do it. Sometimes the employer may also desire to approach the court. They are also not permitted. Therefore, both the parties, namely the employer and also the employer, stand at the mercy of the appropriate government. Therefore, even the legal remedy is totally denied by the present legislation. The legislation which prevails today denies this right to both the parties. They cannot go. They cannot take up the matter to labor court or industrial tribunal unless an order of reference has been passed by the appropriate government under Section 10 of the Industrial Disputes Act. Everything is buried. That is why the experts, they condemn that excessive juridification of industrial disputes is spoiling the entire atmosphere. What is wrong in permitting the parties to directly approach the court? That position has not been statutorily recognized till today. And slightly, the Industrial Relations Code 2020 has indirectly permitted. With several other changes, little changes, insignificant changes, I would like to say. Then the employer, they demand that they should use contract labor system. When we look at the Contract Labor Act, the legislation permits employment of contract labor only in non-core activities. For some unimportant activities, contract labor may be employed, adopted. But as far as the primary and core activities are concerned, contract labor system needs to be abolished. That is the aim of Contract Labor Act. But they ask, they demand, the employers demand that irrespective of the core activity or non-core activity, they should have the liberty to have the contract labor system. That is also a controversy. More than that, the employers demand that fixed term employment, please note, fixed term employment should be introduced. there can be no permanent employment as far as industries are concerned. Maybe for a tenure of 5 years, maybe for a tenure of 3 years, any employee at the whims and fancies of the employer may be appointed. Though the tenured employees are also entitled for all the benefits and rights as if they are permanent and regular. That right they would like to give. But as far as tenure is concerned, it is only for a fixed term. Once they complete 5 years tenure, they have to leave. Maybe depending upon the satisfaction of the employer, that tenure may be extended for one more term. That's all. So they would like to replace the present employment system, the permanency in employment, by a short-term tenure employment. That is also one of the main demand of the Chamber of Commerce, the Employees Federation. Therefore, all these demands are vehemently resisted by all the central trade unions. That is why consensus could not be promoted. The demands of the employer and the demands of the trade union do not coincide. Inconsistent. Therefore, in the middle, the government remains as a silent spectator. Had the government have that political power to overcome, it would have done. But silence, dilemma prevails. Maybe for the simple reason that the support of both the parties is very much indispensable for any political party to get elected. It is a war between vote bank and note bank. Vote bank, which I mean the votes of the working class. For political victory, they need the support of the working class. At the same time, note bank, they depend on entrepreneur, capitalist, because they provide, they finance fund for election. That is the reason why political fund is legally permitted under the provisions of the Trade Union Act 1926. Therefore, when both vote bank and note bank play a vital role, the government is unable to balance. As a result, they keep quiet. It is not that they lack political will. They do not want to do. They do not want to antagonize any of the parties to the industrialization system. As a result, the same old law continues. More than that, there are certain areas where there does not exist any uniformity, especially in respect of certain basic concepts. Whether he is a worker, workman, employee, and the definition relating to retrenchment, still the controversy is going on. What is retrenchment? Some say it is discharge of surplus labor. Some say all forms of termination made by the employer otherwise than as a punishment inflicted by way of disciplinary action would come under retrenchment. As a result, the employer should pay retrenchment compensation. So the controversies in respect of the basic concepts still prevail. In this scenario, I would like to very briefly state the recent trend, what is happening today. I would like to say that, firstly, decline in trade union activities. Do you find good effort of trade union to organize themselves today, especially after the new economic policy introduced from the year 1991? We must say that we witness declining trade union activities. Number of strikes undertaken by the trade union are coming down when we look at the statistical data, we find the number of strikes organized before 1991, after 1991, drastic change. Agitations and protests have today become unsuccessful. The trade unions have lost public sympathy. Trade unions today are viewed as an institution protecting unprotective labor. They fail to realize their social responsibility in building good economy. The membership is falling down. Collective bargaining is totally replaced by individual bargaining. If you are more talented, you are in a position to dictate your own terms of employment as against the employer. You succeed. That is what it is happening in IT industries today. You are in a position to command. You are not simply standing before the employer to accept whatever the terms of employment offered by the employer. If you are more skilled, if you are really talented, you command, you decide, you dictate what ought to be the terms of employment by which you should be governed. What ought to be your salary? You decide, you dictate. If at all the employer accepts, you will get employment. When you become inevitable because of your talent, expertise, that has to be accepted by the employer because the employer needs your service and expertise. Therefore, when we say it is an organized labor, it simply means that the terms and conditions of employment will have to be decided bilaterally through collective bargaining. And this collective bargaining process is to be now replaced by individual bargaining. Therefore, if I am really talented, I need not become a member of the trade union. I dictate, I negotiate with the employer, settle my terms of employment. Therefore, collective bargaining has no relevance in modern times. It is gradually losing its significance. Not only that, the Consumer Forum oppose trade unions because they charge. Only because of the trade union, there is deficiency in goods and services. The industrial disputes and its nature is altogether changing. The present law does not classify industrial disputes into right dispute and interest dispute. You know what is right dispute and what is interest dispute. When any dispute, any industrial dispute, this can be brought within the purview of section 2K of the Industrial Disputes Act, which defines the concept of industrial dispute. Right dispute simply means any dispute in which an individual or a group of workmen alone is concerned. Maybe as a result of dismissal, termination, retrenchment, discharge, any grievance between individual dispute and workman and the employer, that can be said to be individual dispute. That is more particularly the right dispute. Interest dispute, on the other hand, is concerning with the entire workforce of an industry. What ought to be their salary? What ought to be the service conditions of all the employees working in industry? That is said to be interest dispute. Ignoring the nature of industrial dispute, the present legislation does not deal with. It is also one of the recent trends emerging today. We also find changing attitude on the part of the government. As I just pointed out, for effecting retrenchment, layoff, and also closure, permission from the appropriate government is mandatory, provided the industrial establishment has employed 100 or more workers on an average per working day in the preceding 12 months. If permission has not been granted, the employer cannot opt for retrenchment, layoff, or closure. Stop. But today, the change in attitude is found on the part of the government readily accepts the request made by the employer. Thereby, permission is granted. Therefore, securing permission from the appropriate government has become so easy today. It affects the rights of workers. We also find a change in attitude on the part of the adjudication machinery. Adjudication machinery, we find a three-tier adjudication system in the industrial relations. Maybe labor court or industrial tribunal and national tribunal. Taking into consideration the nature of the subject matter of the industrial dispute, we have to decide which adjudicatory authority will have jurisdiction to decide the respective disputes. The labor court, the tribunal readily entertain the concern of the industry, that is the employer. It now leans towards the employer. Once any dispute happen to be adjudicated by these bodies, in all probabilities, the employees will get a favorable award from this labor court and industrial tribunal. But today, the reverse happens. In most of the cases, the employees lose their case against the employer. So that changing attitude on the part of the adjudication machinery is also a recent emerging trend. We also notice diminishing growth of employment. Where is employment? Unemployment is alarming, is going on. No employment virtually. That too in the pandemic situation, even if vacancy exists, no employer comes forward to appoint anyone. It happens not only in private sector, even in government sector. We are all fortunate that we were recruited when normalcy prevailed. If this situation happened earlier, we would not have placed. Therefore, the trend in diminishing growth of employment is also more visible. Maybe in ITES, IT-enabled services, not that much affected. Even en masse retrenchment happens. Considerably, comparatively, they survive. Social security measures are totally neglected. And an innovative trend is found among the state governments, because it is a competitive world. Every state would like to prosper in their industrial arena. Capital need to be attracted. Entrepreneurs should come forward to establish their industries in one state. Therefore, to attract capital, FDI, the state government has a duty to offer more incentives by liberalizing the labor legislations. As we know, labor is in the concurrent list. It is not that the central government alone can make law. State government is also equally competent to make law. A new law can be made, or in the existing central legislations, the state government is also competent to bring about amendments. Therefore, by amending the existing laws and also by making new laws, the state government is trying to attract more capital for the purpose of getting their state more industrialized. The economy will need to be developed. Therefore, this responsible function will have to be performed. Therefore, we find a shift in the responsibility to bring about labor legislations from the central government to the state government. This is nothing but decentralizing labor law reforms. Central government indirectly encourage the state government to go for labor law reforms because the central government is unable to bring about. So these are the latest trend we find in industrial relations scenario. As a concluding remark, I would like to say that the twin objectives of the labor legislations, which everyone will consider, namely industrial democracy and also social justice. Industrial democracy is an indispensable requirement, without which there can be no industrial harmony. At the same time, social justice is also one of the most integral part of industrial jurisprudence. Many of the legislations found under Part 4 of the Indian Constitution in the name of Directive Principles of State Policy, we find components of social justice. Therefore, whatever may be the labor legislations, it should promote both industrial harmony and social justice, without which there can be no prosperity. Even if new economic reforms have been made, you will also admit the fact that economic development is the means, but our goal is human development. Through economic development as a means, we have to achieve human development as a goal. Therefore, in the name of globalization, the rights and interests of the working class cannot be sacrificed, cannot be bulldozed. Therefore, we need to undertake reforms in labor legislations for which trade union is expected to play a constructive role. I would like to say that the role which ought to be played by a trade union should be like an honeybee. How honeybee softly sits on the vector of a flower and suck honey without damaging the flower. The trade union should also act like honeybee, because when we say the trade union, it is interested in securing the rights of the working class. Whereas honeybee sucks the honey, the trade union may try to suck the share in the profit of the industry without damaging the establishment to which they belong. They have to claim, they have to take swiftly the share in the profit. So that constructive role needs to be played by a trade union in the days to come. At the same time, the employer should also change their attitude. Human rights need to be recognized, respected by the employer in every industry. Employer should feel that labor is not a cheaply available commodity in the open market. Labor is more precious. Labor is more valuable. Without labor, there can be no industrial production. Therefore, labor should also become an equal partner in that joint enterprise. When this partnership feel is promoted by the employer, definitely the industry will prosper. At the same time, the approach of the government should also be minimal. Government should keep away from the industrial relations scenario. It has to interfere only when industrial harmony is threatened. At every point of time, it is not expected that the appropriate government should interfere. This, especially this provision presently prevailing in the Industrial Disputes Act 1947, the government is playing a very dominant role. They are controlling the parties. The parties are not at liberty. Everything is decided only by the government. Then what is the use of saying that it is globalized, it is liberalized? The concept liberalization needs that the provisions of law should be liberal. Government should not interfere in the affairs of the parties. Parties should be recognized. Let them decide. When they are unable to decide their affair, it is fair on the part of the government to interfere. Claiming itself to be the champion for the causes of labor, they do not want to withdraw their domination from the industrialization system. If that approach continues, nothing will improve. So change of attitude not only from the employer, not only from the trade union, but also government should also change its attitude. Its role in the industrial relations scenario should be minimal. They should not decide. Like a civil dispute, let the parties go to labor court. Why appropriate government is worried? What is wrong in it? Is it not the basic human right to go to court whenever my right is violated? No employee is having any right to directly go to the labor court. Only one exception. That cannot be a general rule. So generally speaking, the doors of the adjudicatory authorities is totally closed for the parties. The jurisdiction of these adjudicatory bodies can be invoked only at the instance of the government. If the government does not desire, the parties do not have any legal remedy under law, under labor law. As I said, originally the entire labor law belonged to the realm of private law. We have to invoke the provisions of the Indian Contract Act. We have to file a separate suit before a civil court of competent jurisdiction enforcing our legal right, as if it is violation of the terms of the contract. No provisions of labor law can be contested. Labor court, industrial tribunal will not lend any helping hand to the aggrieved parties. To that extent, government plays dominant role. Therefore, the government, unless the government withdraw its role from the industrial relations scenario, situation will not improve. Let the parties decide. The parties are well matured. They know when to go to court, when not to go to court. Such a liberty, if denied, then what is the use in claiming that we respect human rights? The labor law enforcement machineries should be strengthened and activated. They should fairly function. The enforcement of labor provisions, it is when labor law comes into play, it is more of administrative law because it is interwoven. The utility of administrative law is more in labor law. Whatever may be the officials belonging to the labor department, the labor commissioner, labor inspector, labor officer, whoever may be, who are considered to be the authorities of labor enforcement machinery, they should honestly function. As that value is getting little eroded, when the enforcement of labor law provisions are not good, we are unable to achieve the result. Whenever there is any violation, mostly violations only by the employer and not by the employees. Employers violating the labor legislations are allowed to go scot-free, ignored. Therefore, labor legislations are not enforced in its real sense. With these measures, changes, we can really bring about tremendous changes in entire labor legislations. As time did not permit, I did not want to take up any other part of labor law, maybe social security, or maybe law relating to wages, or labor welfare. I just confined with the industrial relations alone. I would like to finally say that even this attempt, which may appear to be a sincere attempt on the part of the present government by enacting 4 labor codes, I would like to say that these 4 labor codes are the old wine in new bottle, the same substance. Section number alone differs. Now you have to what to say, keep in memory what relevant sections are there. Though we are not expected to keep in mind the substance of those provisions, because we need to remember the provisions, some of the vital provisions. That alone is a change, but the same substance is put in a different vessel. So we are longing for the time when the labor legislations will totally be revamped. The day is not too far off. The day will come. When the time comes, we will have a new set of labor legislations. At that point of time, the present old, obsolete, outdated legislations will be thrown out from the statute book. I wish that day should come in the near future so that the entire labor law will be lifted. With this, let me conclude by conveying my congratulations to the organizers of the program. I would like to once again congratulate the untiring effort. See, this is not an easy task. I too have little experience in organizing programs, little experience. We know, we understand the effort, we understand the pain. We understand, see, this is not a simple, what to say, 1 week program. It may appear to be 1 week program, but planning, meticulous planning and execution of that plan, more important. At least I presume Madam would have spent nearly not less than 2 months for this program to make the program a very grand success. When the very opening session is so good, and both the vice chancellors spoke very well, and the director of legal studies, with a very good start, the program started. It had a very good takeoff. Now it is flying. And I believe and I am confident that it will definitely and smoothly land. And this effort will never go unrewarded. Everyone will reward. The entire team in general and Madam Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh in particular. That is why I said it is in the history of Tamil Nadu Legal Educational Service. Such a mega academic event is being organized by a college. Hats up to the entire team headed by Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh. I congratulate wholeheartedly, and I also wish that many more programs like this program, the team under the leadership, dynamic leadership of Professor Dr. Gauri Ramesh, the college will come out and it will further take the image of the Chennai Dr. Ambedkar Government Law College Pudupakkam to a greater height. That is the pinnacle. That is the pinnacle. Madam, you have achieved. You have achieved.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
I would like to convey my best wishes to all the young teachers. You are the future. You are the future. We are like labor legislations, I would like to say. I am also outdated. I am also outdated. I am not referring anyone. I am outdated because of the age, and we have come out over. Our innings is over. Now the future is yours. You have to shine. and adequately all the teachers are, I should not say advised, by the learned speakers on the first day, adequately appraised of what the present situation is, what is expected of a teacher, how you have to groom yourself. And I am confident that the Tamil Nadu Legal Educational Service is more blessed with good teachers today. Unlike the yesteryears, now the teachers are so good, so updated. Try. No limit, no limit. You know, when you excel, that is considered to be, I should not say, but as a friend, I would like to say, it is a kick. It is a kick, you know, because when you are praised more, it will activate you. It will make you move forward further. Therefore, show your excellence, show your excellence. The days are gone. You are in the competitive world. When I was a teacher, no, not much competition. Because the department itself was very small, with few colleges. Now it has expanded like anything under the dynamic leadership of the then Director of Legal Studies, Professor Dr. Santosh Kumar, now the Honorable Vice Chancellor. The department has expanded like anything. Opportunities are plenty. Many of you would become the principal. In our days, no, becoming principal, we cannot think of. We cannot think of, because only 4 or 5 colleges. So opportunity may come very rarely. So if anyone is posted as principal, that is the highest achievement we considered at that point of time. But now opportunities are plenty. Unless you show all your talent, channelize your talent, thereby you bring out your talents, we may not have proper place in the department. So I just suggest, beware of these opportunities, improve yourself, no limit for your progress. You will become the future Director of Legal Studies. You will become the Vice Chancellor of our law universities. You will occupy various positions. I sincerely pray Almighty to shower all His blessings for your good prosperity, welfare upon all the young law teachers. My blessings and my best wishes. Once again, I congratulate Madam and I thank you, Madam, for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Our privilege, sir, our privilege.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a thought-provoking and research-based lecture. So, shall we move on to the question and session, sir? Because there is 2-3 questions.
Yes.
The first question is from our Dr. Debashree Mukherjee from West Bengal.
Yes,
sir. Do you think that is industrial bureaucracy and financial constraint that is standing in the way of implement of proper reforms?
Definitely. Industrial bureaucracy in the sense the government which is responsible for administering labor legislations, that has to play a constructive role. When it fails to play a constructive role, definitely the interest of the working class will suffer.
The second question is from
Dr.
Ambika Nayagar, Vitsal, VIT School of Law, VIT Chennai campus. Whether the implementation of labor code lead to mass retrenchment or that will not lead to any other laissez-faire system. What is your opinion on that, sir?
No, it will not lead to mass retrenchment because though, as I pointed out, the employers demanded flexible provisions relating to retrenchment. The government did not incorporate. The government did not consider. In that respect, the employers are dissatisfied with the stand taken by the government. The present provision, which permits the employer to retrench subject to certain conditions. The same provisions have been incorporated in the new legislation also. That threshold limit is same. Therefore, there is no improvement as far as this particular stand of the employer is concerned. Same situation prevails. Therefore, it is not going to be an added benefit for the employer.
Yes, sir. Another
It will not lead to mass retrenchment.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. The another question from FTPK 300. So private sector, especially the MNCs, have succeeded in banishing trade unions. What role law can play to bring them back?
See, law, as I pointed out, presently is not good. As far as MNCs are concerned, when an employee is recruited in any MNC, multinational corporations, they are so particular that they ensure the employee not to become a trade union member. They want to keep trade union activities away from the enterprise. They don't want to, they don't want the trade union to enter into their premises.
Yes,
That has to be changed, and it can be changed only by the existing central trade unions. The existing well-established central trade unions may be AITUC, CITU, or INTUC, or HMS should expand its wing to the MNC also. Thereby, the employees appointed in the NMC may be admitted as a member of the trade union. Once that is done, that trade union will raise their voice for the employees of that MNC. That is the only opportunity. Law cannot help. Law cannot help. The existing strong trade unions can extend an helping hand. Thereby, trade union activities can be flourished in newly established MNCs.
thank you, sir. The final question from Mrs. Epsiba Pula, our college colleague and the co-convener also. In Germany, the notice period for retrenchment of any employee is calculated in relation to his tenure of employment. Can this be adopted in India so that the welfare of the employee is protected, sir?
It cannot be, because I sincerely feel it may happen in Germany, but our conditions is totally different. Because retrenchment in most of the times, you know, we have certain procedures. When retrenchment is to be effected, the junior has to be sent first. Senior cannot be. When this is applied as a legal provision, this may not suit to the Indian condition. Sometimes, irrespective of the fact that the length of service is ignored by the employer and the senior member is retrenched first, our laws will not permit. Then that prescribing that particular condition in the statute book will become waste.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your thought-provoking and great lecture today. We are very much delighted to hear from you. Then you praised us a lot. You blessed us a lot. It is one of the greatest occasion in this thing. So thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot, sir, because you are given such an enormous thinking that the LPG era, we are in the LPG era. You are explained clearly about our unemployment problem, the coding, the new code problems and everything. It will be very useful to us. Then we will interact with our students. It will be very great insight to give the inputs to our students, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir.
And also the entire team. Thank you.
Definitely, your encouraging words is a boost for all of us, sir. The co-convener team of 6 members, all newly joined people. I think they must be flying in the air after all your encouraging words, sir. Thank you so much, sir. It's a blessing for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
May I leave, madam?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Participants, kindly fill the feedback form. You may rejoin at 2 o'clock, 1:45 probably. Your new link will be posted in the Telegram group.
எல்லாத்தையும் அவங்கள வேணா வச்சிடலாம்.
But what is happening?
ஒண்ணும் இல்ல. ஸ்பாட்லைட் ரிமூவ் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்க எல்லாரையும். மேடம் ஸ்பீக்கர்
Recording cut பண்ணல sir.
பண்ணிடுறேன். ஸ்டாப்.